Labor movement.
Labor movement rose up first in Europe after Industrial Revolution. Labor movement was majorly around three factors: working conditions, wages, and recreation. Labor union is an iconic organization in labor movement. Its final purpose was to pursuing better treatment for workers. The union agglomerated labor forces from individual into a considerable power. In United States, National Labor Union, the first major labor union, was created in 1866. Since it was the first, it has flaws. One of many was it has difficulties with coordination due to its rapid growth and unprecedented amount of members. The leader, William H. Silvis, attempted to use politics as a solution by running it in 1872 election. When he got a very little amount of votes, it led to the quick collapse of the union. The second labor union, the Knights of Labor, raised the banner of the labor movement, which first opened the road for laborers to fight for their rights. The union grew to 700,000 members, mainly focused on fighting for an 8-hour day. It was a very prevalent issue at the time for factory workers. Due to many unsuccessful strikes, the union morally collapsed and the union died with it. In 1886, the most famous union in American history was founded, the American Federation of Labor. Within the period of American Federation of Labor, labor movement reached the climax. According to statistics, over 2 million members were in the union by mid-20th century. Owing to its high population, well-established leader, and its focus on bread and butter issues, it achieved their goals. It successfully negotiated to increase wages and provide safer working conditions for its members. It is still an active union today with about 14 million members. With the development of labor movement, laws which constructed to protect labor rights and has been becoming more completely with hundreds of years. It made great difference in movement and create major contribution to proletarian rising. Later, proletarian rising will be able to become one of the independent political power of the world, known as Communism Party.
Worker-management relationship. When America started industrializing, morality was nowhere to be seen. This is due to the varying perspectives of the workers, later the labor unions, versus the management. The management provided terrible working conditions for the workers. These included poor ventilation, dangerous equipment, and constant spreading of diseases brought in by migrant ships. Why? Because in the management's perspective, the less they have to deal with keeping the workers safe and healthy, the more profit that is gained. Obviously for the workers, they only care about their working conditions. Another example is the use of child labor. People found the use of children in factories as terrible and morally wrong, not just because they were too young, but because it was often resulted in the child becoming crippled and or sick. However, children were just working to the management, nothing more. This division and perspective on certain issues drove the need for labor unions. Wages and hours were also major issues. Workers worked on average 60 hours a week for 10 cents an hour. This kept parents and children at the factories all day and gave them little money to show for it. Moreover, it was very common to live in tenements, which were large apartment buildings made for workers that couldn't afford houses or apartments in the city due to the low income. These housing units were usually overcrowded, poorly ventilated, and didn't have proper indoor plumbing. Labor unions fought to change all this. They fought for a lower amount of hours, commonly 8 hours. They also fought for a higher wage to support their families. Many other issues included working conditions, child labor, health care, and housing were protested. Tactics like boycotts, strikes, and protests were used, and even though there were many failures along the way, it netted in success. The Fair Labor Standards Act was passed in 1938 to end child labor. The Factory and Workshop Act, along with others, provided a guideline for the safety required in all factories. Many strikes and boycotts were successful, resulting in the management of those factories providing higher wages and lower hours for its workers. By the end, they proved that in order for management to reach the profit thereafter, worker satisfaction needed to be the top priority. They needed to ensure workplace safety and a proper amount of hours and income.
Many historians consider that labor movement was a violent period in American history. There were many strikes. During the labor movement, workers were protesting their poor working conditions and low wages. Many workers went on strikes because their business owners refused to accept their terms about their wages and conditions. The Great Railroad Strike was one of the most famous strikes. It occurred in 1877. Prior to this strike, there was one main depression, a panic of 1873 on Wall Street. With the Depression, railroad construction was reduced, factories were closed, and thousands of Americans lost their jobs and their homes. The employers that were still in business cut wages. Such wage reduction and unemployment made workers feel disappointment. On July 20th, 1877, they gathered to protest. About 700,000 workers went on the strike, forcing trains stopped and rail closed. In order to suppress the strike and reopen the railroad, the governor and president called out militia and federal troops. Some writers and innocent people were killed. Later, the railroads were back in business within 2 days. Here are three main impacts. Union like American Federation of Labor was established for supporting strikers, and unions became better organized, which led to more strikes because they support strikes. But the good thing was a new militia unit was formed. The strengthening of the police and state militia to prepare for future conflicts. We also got Homestead Strike. The Homestead Strike happened at Carnegie's steel company in 1892 as the price of rounded steel products started to decline in 1890. Harry Clive Frick, the manager of the company, was determined to cut workers' wages by breaking the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers. However, the union failed to accept his terms, so he began locking out workers and said, "I would no longer negotiate with the union again." For rejecting Frick's proposed wage cut, workers began to strike. Frick was trying to disperse strikers, so he hired about 300 picketers and sent them out. But strikers opened fire on a barge loaded when picketers arrived. Couples of picketers and strikers were killed. The governor of the Pennsylvania called out militia, and the strike ended. Afterward, the Homestead Company was reopened to non-union workers, but wages still cut and the workday was lengthened. Many strikers will not be able to regain employment. In some degrees, we can say labor movement did harm to the economy because as many workers went on strikes, factories make no productions and profits. As some unions were established for supporting strikers and negotiating to increase their members' wages, companies were only reopened for non-union workers, but they were still low paid. Strikers failed to regain employment, which means less labor force and lower productivity. So of course, companies want to hire more workers, but more workers mean higher costs. Due to higher costs, companies had to increase their products' prices, which led to fewer consumers and make lower profits.
The labor movement was a success in several ways. Due to industrialization, the economic skyrocketed. New technology provided more efficient ways to make products, resulting in more profit to the factories. Factories provided millions of jobs. This is partly due to the fact that skill was taken out of the equation. Even though skilled workers were preferred, the unskilled and uneducated would still provide a job at factories. The relationship between the workers and management completely changed. By the end, management learned to respect their workers and provide safer conditions and a better living as a whole. In addition, the movement created a new political party. Labor unions as a whole were a key part of forming society today. They provided standards of how workers should be treated and helped to grow the economy.
Thank you for your watching.